Wrestling with Joeylicious. Book 2. The Saga continues. Chapter 1. The Ballad of Clarence from Mexico. The Taco House was one of those cheap Mexican chain restaurants in Brooklyn where even the clientele with little to no regard for their colon would begin sweating before sitting down. These were fire eaters of the lowest order, and currently, Robert Scally was chief among them. He devoured his foreign table slop with the voracity of a starving hyena. In between swigs of beer from a tiny styrofoam cup, the staff didn't seem to notice or mind the scrawny Irish garbage compactor sneak in a brown paper bagged 40-ounce under his jacket, so it was a 4-star establishment as far as he was concerned. If the Taco House knew of Scally's most recent misadventure, they may have cared even less. He had to flee from the clutches of a deranged swordsman of African-American descent, all because of a quickie he had with 2 Asian goddesses. The quickie was so quick, in fact, that it never actually happened. Again. But their ex-boyfriend, Samurai Dwayne, wasn't interested in a trial. He went straight for the execution. Thankfully, all of that was over with. For now. Sitting on the other side of the table, returning from horrors of his own, was Scally's once-a-week wrestling compadre, Joey Casada, a.k.a. Joeylicious. Still dressed in his soiled black singlet with his red boas now missing a few feathers, he had somehow made it to Tampa, Florida and back, but not before getting his ass kicked by his lifelong hero, Hulk Hogan. Joey had insulted the giant blonde icon on a grand stage and was rightfully punished for it, but he still took his defeat much harder than his little friend took his. In fact, he hadn't even touched his food yet. He was too busy penning his farewell letter to humanity. He wanted to let everyone know just how sorry he was, but that his death was necessary. So far, all he had come up with was "Goodbye, cruel, cruel world," a far cry from a Shakespearean sonnet. Joey pondered if adding another cruel would help before turning to his so-called manager for guidance. "Do you have to get a suicide note notarized?" Scally plopped his cup down forcefully on the table, causing some beer to spill out. "Will you knock that crap off? I got thrown out of my house again. Been sleeping in the gym all week. If that isn't bad enough, Washi and Sayo are back with the samurai." His last gripe was only a rumor, but the rapid-firing sex machine felt it in his bones to be true. Joey scoffed at that mere bag of tragedy shells. "Scal, I smacked the Hulkster. He laid me out in front of hundreds of his adoring fans. It's over." "You're still breathing, aren't ya?" His enabler responded with a shrug. "So you showed him you can take a punch." But Joey was just getting started. "I was carried out on a stretcher. Some lifeguard had to give me mouth-to-mouth." Scally narrowed his eyes. "Was it a dude?" "I don't know. Probably. I was afraid to ask." Terrified was more like it. His manager held out his hands. "You see? Don't be so negative. Maybe it was a hot chick, and things are looking up." It was actually a Speedo-wearing, Freddie Mercury look-alike named Earl, but the Italian dream was never the wiser. "Looking up?" Scally's pep talk was only adding to his client's depression. "I ran out of gas money and had to leave my mom's Civic in Tampa. It took me 4 days to hitchhike home. I'm pretty sure I rode back with a car thief, a serial killer, and a Scientology Bible salesman." Scally opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His forehead wrinkled in confusion. "All at the same time? What difference does it make?" The answer was yes and no to Scally's question, but better left unsaid. "Well, if you gotta go, at least we'll meet your Saturday Night Fever action figures." The uneducated blonde poured himself another cup of beer, satisfied that his work was complete. A suicide hotline worker, he was not. Joey looked down at his forwarded cry for help 3 if you count the double use of cruel as 1, before sneering at his glib counselor. "How about I will you an atomic drop? Better yet, let's make it a murder-suicide." Ignoring the threat, Scally stood up and brushed the Mexican fare that missed its mark from his shirt. "Speaking of atomic, I need to drop something atomic myself. All this negative energy is messing with my insides." Joey could only shake his head as his best friend abandoned him for the bathroom. Even in his greatest hour of need, the struggling wrestler would face it alone. Passing the table closest to the men's room, Scally decided to extend a friendly warning to the family of 4 occupying it. Enjoying their inauthentic meal, the husband and wife, and their 2 adorable kids, were straight from a 20th century Norman Rockwell-esque painting, and the neighborhood menace was more than happy to deliver some of his table's misery to theirs. "Hey guys, welcome to Taco House." Scally opened with a smile. The husband looked up in good cheer. "Thank you. Do you work here?" "God, no!" Scally jovially pointed to the bathroom just a few feet away. "I'm just on my way to sink a battleship. so unless you're packing air freshener or a blowtorch, I'd steer clear for a while. But enjoy those appetizers." The look of horror on the faces of the perfect middle-class family was priceless as the human disruptor cackled, entering the bathroom. Suddenly, their food was far less appealing. Joey managed to ignore his friend's latest unhandy work, yet he had made no progress on his letter. Still pondering the addition of a third cruel, he was interrupted by a vaguely familiar Mexican accent.
"Would you like to see the dessert menu, sir?"
Vaguely familiar or not, the anguished Italian waved a dismissive hand without looking up. "No thanks. If I'm going out gluten-free."
"You know, that boa really accentuates your pecs."
But that piqued the interest of the dispirited wrestler. He was desperate for positive feedback of any kind. "Oh, you think so?" He looked up and was taken aback by the older but fit Latino man standing before him. It wasn't just a friendly waiter with an eye for fashion. It was the former WWF Intercontinental Champion, Tito Santana, dressed in his El Matador gimmick, which also happened to pass for a waiter's uniform. "Wait, you're Tito Santana." Tito, well aware that Joey was teetering, got right down to his life-saving sales pitch.
"Lish, I heard what you were saying to your little friend. You can never give up on your dream."
Joey scoffed. "Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You were the Intercontinental Champion." Tito the waiter glanced toward the kitchen to make sure another table order wasn't ready before he sat across from the troubled wrestler.
"Let me tell you a story about a little boy from Mexico named Clarence."
It was an intriguing opening, but of course, Joey was more confused than intrigued. "They have Clarences in Mexico?" he interrupted. Tito held up a patient hand.
Just stick with me."
He made sure Joey was all ears before proceeding.
"He was bitten by a snake. Not a poisonous snake, but a snake nonetheless. When he grew up, he got a job with the phone company. His family was very proud of him. He used to install phones all around the country. One day, he even worked through a tornado."
Whatever focus Joey had was lost as he leapt to what he assumed was the moral of the story. "Tito, are you Clarence? Are you this little boy from Mexico?"
"No, I'm from Texas."
Tito countered. "Am I Clarence?" Again, Joey's intrigue was replaced by confusion.
"Don't you know your own name?"
Tito responded incredulously, confusion now infecting him. Frustrated, Joey slumped to the back of his chair. "Then what's the point of this story?"
"The point is hard work pays off. It took me 10 years of sweat and determination before I got my title shot against Don Morocco."
Okay, so the former Mexican champion had a long-winded parable he obviously hadn't dusted off in a while. The Italian dream wasn't sold. Hard work? The Hulkster got his title shot a month after his return to the WWF.
"Don't remind me. That son of a bitch."
Apparently, Tito would have been useful in Tampa. Joey stood up. "Don't you see? It has nothing to do with sweat or determination or little Mexican Clarences. It's just dumb luck." As if to prove his point, he pointed at Tito. "Look, you're a waiter at the taco house." Now Tito stood up. Joey should have taken this as a sign to quit while he was behind, but, as usual, he pressed his luck. "The Hulkster's a multi-millionaire." Ripping off his apron, Tito growled.
"Here, hold this, would you?"
Joey took the apron, clueless to his offense. Then his mouth fell open as his eyes drifted to the Intercontinental Championship belt wrapped around the legendary wrestler's waist. "Is that the—" He leaned forward as if to touch the golden prize, and annoyed Tito smacked his hand away.
"Yeah!"
And then he casually walked away. Joey relaxed and let down his guard, assuming the famous waiter just had another table to deal with. A flying elbow soon convinced him otherwise. The duped Italian took the Mexican blast squarely on the chin before crashing through his own table and onto the hard floor. Tito stood over the pathetic excuse for a wrestler and pumped a triumphant fist.
"Arriba!"
A split second later, Scally strolled out of the bathroom, wiping his wet hands onto his food-stained tank top. Although he stopped at the sight of his sprawled-out, motionless friend and the destruction around him, the scrawny Irishman wasn't all that surprised or even concerned. After all, he had seen this before. Not this exactly, but other renditions. He addressed the only waiter in the restaurant, who was dressed like Tito, but certainly wasn't Tito, quite matter-of-factly. "What happened, Chico? He stiff you on the tip?" "Man, I didn't do nothing," the shaken waiter shouted defensively. "This psycho did it to himself." Of course Scally knew the answer to his insulting question before he even asked it. Ah, that again. The emotional waiter quickly went from shaken to stirred. "Get your boy out of here! I gotta clean all this up," he added in anger. Scally, relieved that his brown paper-bagged 40 had somehow survived Joey's latest furniture slaying, grabbed what was left of it with one hand, and began to drag his one and only client toward the door with his other. His unconscious friend had always been much bigger than him, but now Joey was dead weight as well. "Come on, Lish. You're making us look bad." The recently disgusted family of four watched the closing proceedings in horror from their table. Catching sight of them, out of the corner of his eye, the blonde menace left them with a parting gift. Kids, be careful with that mystery meat burrito. This could be you." Scally didn't stick around for the family's disturbed responses as he finally got Joey through the exit and out of the taco house. No one would be returning anytime soon. Chapter 2. Christoph Jericho. As Joey dealt with his crisis of conscience in Brooklyn, another kind of crisis was brewing at the pro wrestling headquarters in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This was where all decisions, both business and creative, were made in regards to the highest rung of the wrestling ladder, a rung that Joeylicious, the Italian dream, could only dream of ever reaching. In these hallowed halls, stars were created, storylines were developed, and contracts were disputed or agreed upon. Currently, Executive Vice President Erica Martin, World Wrestling Champion Chris Jericho, and his manager, Stephen Brown, were in the middle of a heated discussion in Erica's office. Brown had the floor. "What do you mean? He has a conflict? This is for the heavyweight title. Isn't Farley under contract with us?" Erica sighed as if they had already been over this a dozen times. "Of course he's under contract with us, but it stipulates that he won't wrestle on the Sabbath. It's in fine print." Jericho's frustrated manager threw up his hands and flopped back in his chair. "Then why the hell did we schedule our biggest match of the year on a Saturday?" "Like I said, the fine print," the executive reiterated. Again. "We didn't even know he was Jewish." "That's because he's not Jewish, for Christ's sake." Brown was beside himself. "Then why won't he wrestle on a Saturday?" Erica countered. Brown countered her counter with what he thought was obvious. "Because he's a nut." Finally, a significantly calmer Jericho offered his 2 cents.
"Steve-O, chill out, man. I totally understand. He's a religious butterfly extending his wings out to God. It reminds me of the time I went on a spiritual retreat with Zsa Zsa Gabor back in the early 90s. We went to Bucharest and locked ourselves in a 200-degree tent for 6 hours.
Whatever that was, it was all said with a quasi-British accent that threw Erica for a loop. She looked to the champ's manager with confusion. Jericho continued to reminisce as if he was a duke on the autistic spectrum.
Zsa Zsa got quite frisky that night, if I recall.
"Why is Chris talking like this?" the executive whispered to Brown. "He sounds like Mr. Howell from Gilligan's Island." The manager waved away her concerns. "It's his new shtick. I think he sounds more like that L. Ron Hubbard guy." He actually sounded like a cross between the Count of Monte Cristo and Orville Redenbacher, but why get technical? By the way, address him as Christoph from now on. The champ feels it's more consistent with the accent.
"What are you two darlings humming about?"
The newly christened Christoph interrupted, chiding them playfully.
"There are no secrets here."
His manager forced a smile. "It's nothing, champ." With bigger fish to fry, Erica dropped her query into Jericho's new peculiarity. "Farley just gave notice that his clause has been exercised. My hands are tied." But the champ continued to butt in from the other side of the pond.
"Speaking of exercise, I just returned from my Pilates class with Joyce DeWitt and Lola Falana, and you're both interfering with my 70s-infused zen."
Brown did his best to politely ignore his transitioning client as he stayed on Erica. "How did you not see this coming? We've been working on this storyline for 6 months." Jericho turns... He realized his mistake immediately. Christoph turns babyface.
"Stevie, honey, I told you what my therapist said."
Jericho chimed in yet again. "I know, champ," Brown reassured him. "No more Mr. Bad Guy," hence the babyface turn.
"At least till I work out some childhood issues."
Did his therapist also inspire the aristocratic accent? Brown refocused with Erica. "So what else? Have you talked to the writers? We're a little short on time here. It would be nice to actually promote this match. Erica wasn't entirely discouraged. There are some ideas we're spitballing, she said. Shoot. Brown was all ears. She began to fill the manager in. If Chris suddenly had something to overcome, Christoph, Brown corrected. If Christoph suddenly had something to overcome before the match, like an illness or a personal tragedy, Jericho immediately had his reservations.
Nothing negative, darlings. I'm trying to be one with the universe.
Scratch that, his manager concurred. Erica twisted her mouth in contemplation. What about a long-lost relative coming back into the fold? Jericho gave her an enigmatic look.
I actually have a long-lost relative.
Thinking she may have hit the mark, Erica demanded a quick elaboration. And? The champ's response was entirely anticlimactic.
I'd rather he didn't come back into the fold.
Feeling a bit of a letdown himself, Brown turned back to Erica. You were saying? But before she could spit out anything else, Jericho held up a finger.
I've got it.
Two pairs of eyes immediately honed in on him as he began to put his flashbulb idea into words.
My newfound love of nature, flowers in particular. Let's do something with that.
Erica looked to Brown for clarification, but he was just as oblivious as she was. Flowers?
Yes, perhaps I can fight for flowers or with flowers,
the champ added. With flowers? You just said...
No, not fight against flowers, silly goose. I could morph a nice petunia into a weapon against my opponent. Think of the symbolism.
Jericho was already sold until his manager added sour milk to his bowl of thought cereal. Isn't a petunia a plant? It was a legitimate question. It's a plant with flowers on it, Erica clarified. Brown let that sink in. Oh, so a hybrid. Jericho couldn't believe that these lesser beings were actually second-guessing him. Brown sensed his client's annoyance. It's a start, he said, offering a compromise. But the executive in the room wasn't even sure of that. Let me get back to you after the next writers' meeting. If Lou's office was the size of a shoebox, his studio apartment was a virtual tin cup. It had enough room for a torn-up recliner, a static-ridden TV, Lou, and little else. Currently, all three were in play, although describing Lou as in play was a bit of a stretch. In actuality, he was embedded in the reclined recliner like a chalk-drawn body at a crime scene. This was his leisure time away from the day-to-day operations of Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league Brawl, and his leisure was best spent watching reruns from the 1970s. This particular trip down nostalgia lane had cops in it, and Lou chuckled along with the live audience who probably weren't alive anymore. The peace and tranquility of the evening was soon disrupted by a loud knock at the door. Cursing under his breath, Lou tried to push himself out of the stubborn, comfy chair to no avail. The indentations from his body acted like a supernatural hand preventing him from a clean escape. Suddenly, the door burst wide open, and in barged Joey and Scally. More annoyed by the unexpected intrusion than the possibility of his lock being damaged, Lou just gave up and stayed in the chair. "The hell are you numbnuts doing here?" he demanded. Scally was the first to step forward. "My client demands victory. He wants the title." "What client and what title?" Lou was honestly in the dark. The scrawny negotiator turned to his friend. "Joey, the Brawl title," he clarified. Lou's response was both flat and noncommittal. Oh, Joey offered a hopeful look. "So, what do you say, Lou? You gotta let me take down that sham of a rock." Clever word usage, but it's not gonna happen. The sleazy little man enjoyed strangling wishful deliriums in the crib. "Why not?" the Italian daydreamer protested. With no other strategy in his managerial toolbox, Scally merely parroted his client. "Yeah, why not? This is Shamrock's last match with us." It was the only explanation Lou felt was required. "Good, so let me beat him," Joey added, far from satisfied. Pushing off the recliner with his elbows, the corrupt operator leaned forward with a purpose. "You can't beat him. Mr. Morelli has him scheduled for his first high school match next week. He's not going to send him there off a defeat. So what, we're just going to have a vacated title then?" Lou waved away the wannabe challenger's concern. "Let me worry about that. For now, just show up tomorrow and get your ass kicked like you normally do." At this, Scally even took offense. "Hey, watch it! Yeah, Lou, a little respect, huh?" Joey added. "In my 20s, I dominated every grammar school gym in this zip code." That may have been an overstatement. How many grammar school gyms were there anyway? In any zip code? Regardless, Scally nodded along moronically. Damn straight! Lou closed the case by emphatically pointing at the TV. You're interrupting a Barney Miller rerun. I'd show you both to the door, but it's already behind you. Now that they had solid directions to the exit, what more could Team Joeylicious say? Scally said it anyway. When the title is vacated, can't you just give it to Joey so this meeting is a win-win for all of us? Get the hell out of here, Lou shouted, his voice echoing throughout the no-bedroom apartment. Fueled by anger, he finally wiggled out of the recliner and escorted the two nuisances out. Then he locked the door with a deadbolt and a chain for good measure. There would be no more interruptions on this night. All in the Family was coming on next. Chapter 3. Godzilla the Greek. Sitting alone in a pew, humbled by the trials and tribulations of life, including a Tito Santana flying elbow, Joey appeared to have the entire St. Thomas Aquinas Church to himself. Why couldn't Lou just give him the belt? He had already been the undisputed champion of Brawl before. Sure, it was only for a week, and it was due to a technicality. But why quibble with such minor details? Okay, let's quibble. On the Saturday night in question, when Joey was still clinging to his 20s, Godzilla the Greek, one of the original members of Brawl, was the champ. He wasn't all that monstrous, and he probably wasn't even Greek. But for his finisher, he would eat a raw jalapeno pepper and then breathe on his opponent for a crippling effect. The opponent, unable to take the heat, would immediately tap out for the submission. Of course, the clever gimmick would have worked on Joeylicious as well. Only Godzilla choked on his jalapeno during their match. Before anyone could figure out what was happening or notice that it was unusual for a Greek to turn blue, the opportunistic Italian snuck in a quick victory pin. The defeated champion's life was miraculously spared when a second-year medical student ran in from the bleachers and applied the Heimlich, but the proverbial cat was already out of the bag. There were no peppers around to save Joeylicious the following week, and his all-too-short reign came to an abrupt end at the hands of the mighty Tim, another Brawl original. Finally, with his mind back on the present, Joey bowed his head to pray and mangled his way through an entire Our Father, which he inexplicably mixed and matched with a Hail Mary. Thankfully, Father Randazzo arrived just in time to interrupt the Italian sinner after his first Amen, which to his credit he remembered was at the end. You show up to confession, to pray, but never to Sunday Mass, the priest said warmly, looking down at the lost member of his flock. I know, Joey admitted as he came out of his misguided trance. Father Randazzo took a seat beside him. What's troubling you, Joseph? I'm at a crossroads, Father. I'm afraid my wrestling career may be at an end. Sensing the seriousness in Joey's tone, the good priest tried the pragmatic approach. Well, at least you have the new career as a gym teacher. That seems to be working out. You don't believe in me either, Joey quickly responded with a pout. When you were young, we were all in your corner. But now you're over 40 and the corner is a lot lonelier. Was Joey suddenly growing up? Probably not, but let's play along, shall we? Father Randazzo continued with his thread of common sense. God is always in your corner. He just may not be the biggest wrestling fan. Joey scoffed. Tell me about it. With that, the priest patted the washed-up athlete on the back. All right, good talk, he said as he stood. Joey gave the bailing counselor an incredulous look. That's it? What kind of advice is that? Oh, I'm sorry. You weren't finished? Honestly surprised, Father Randazzo sat back down and waited for Joey to continue. You're really slipping, Father. The infrequent churchgoer wasn't about to just let that pass. What can I say? It's Saturday, the priest ruefully admitted. The Italian dream took his time collecting his remaining thoughts. I have a title match tonight, he finally announced. Hey, that's great. Joey was far less enthusiastic. I'm supposed to lose. Again, he added. Father Randazzo frowned. That's what I could never understand about your sport. Where's the competition? Everything is preordained. Much like his own religion, but that's a story for another day. And I just wanted to go out on top, Joey mused as if he wasn't listening. So go out on top. It seemed like a simple enough solution to the priest. How? I just told you. If you plan on calling it quits anyway, why not fight for real this one time? Father Randazzo elaborated. Joey's forehead wrinkled as if he was in the middle of a brain cramp. And win? That would be up to you, wouldn't it? Finally, a glimmer of hope as the priest's words sunk in. Yeah, it would. With a smile, the quickie counselor began to stand again. Okay then, Joey whipped his head around. Father, would you sit still? What's the rush? An unapologetic Father Randazzo nodded toward the back of the church. I believe you have a visitor. Joey turned to see Anne-Marie Degrassi standing by the entrance. His voice was a whisper as the full potential of the miracle unfolding seemed to lift his spirits further. How'd you know we reconnected? The good priest held up his hands enigmatically. Ah, he works in mysterious ways. What does that even mean? Realizing that any further explanation would ruin the effect, the holy man washed his hands of the matter. I'll leave you 2 kids. And at that, he headed toward the church altar. Joey took a deep breath, rose, and made his way toward Anne-Marie. In an effort to sound nonchalant, he greeted his childhood sweetheart with a common thought. Brings back memories, doesn't it? Or so he hoped. Anne-Marie was already eyeballing him suspiciously. Joey, did you follow me here? Joey was taken aback. No, I was here first. I was hoping you followed me, he answered, pleading his defense. Realizing her quick-triggered judgment was off the mark, she stammered. Oh, I'm sorry, Joey continued to bridge the distance between them. Maybe it's divine intervention. I'm not even religious. I just came in to get out of the sun for a minute. Suddenly her guard was up again. Knowing things tended to go south fast with his ex, Joey switched to the gallant approach. He held out a hand, offering her a seat in the back pew. Please. I insist. Anne-Marie looked toward the exit hesitantly before sitting beside her former classmate. Unaware of her continued trepidation, Joey dragged her right back into his time machine. Remember midnight mass when Scally dropped that 40 back here? Wasn't that this past Christmas? Anne-Marie corrected. Well, yeah, Joey frowned, recalling that it was more of an annual event. But I was talking about the time it happened in the 8th grade. When it smashed on the floor, it echoed through the whole church. This actually caused quite the stir at the time. It happened during communion, and Father Maurer had to cut the passing out of the Eucharist short. A few old ladies were beside themselves, and one even charged Scally with her cane. Normally this would have invoked laughter from Anne-Marie, but she had her mind on something unexpected. You never called me about that ice cream. Joey could have kicked himself. With Veronica, I know. I wanted to wait till next week. This one's been rough. She immediately softened, sensing that he had something nagging at him as well. It didn't work out in Tampa? Let's just say I completely blew it with the Hulkster. I'm calling it quits after my match tonight. And there it was. After 20 years of wrestling in dirty sweat boxes throughout the 11234 zip code, Joey announced his retirement. Anne-Marie was briefly floored until her healthy relationship with skepticism reemerged. It's true, Joey insisted. With a sigh, he looked toward the altar. Did you know I'm a gym teacher now? Steady salary, pension, health care, well, sort of on the health care. I might even settle down soon and have little Joeyliciouses. Oh, I'm done with kids, Anne-Marie responded without even registering her response. Joey immediately reversed course. Or not, as long as she knew he was flexible. Anne-Marie leaned in. Joey, are you quitting for me? She asked with total sincerity. No, Joey blushed. Why would you ask that? She was clearly not convinced. Joey read her lackluster expression. But if I was, wouldn't that be a good thing? You know, for us, he continued, adding a wrinkle. I just lost a husband. I'm not looking for another one. Well, that slammed the door on that. But of course, Joey knocked again anyway. Are you sure? That sounded like a thinly veiled proposal. Anne-Marie couldn't help but laugh. Can't we just stick to ice cream as originally planned? She was interested in baby steps, not giant leaps for Joey kind. The Italian dreamer blindly pressed ahead. Come to my match tonight. Her amusement quickly turned to incredulity. After what happened the last time. I didn't know you were coming then. Joey desperately tried to explain. Not a good idea. Anne-Marie stressed each word with emphasis. Leaving it all out on the field, Joey had one last ploy left in his back pocket. It's for the belt, and I plan on ending my career with it on. Plan on? Don't you already know the outcome? Joey sidestepped the question. It would mean a lot to me if you were there, he added instead. The tone of his voice was enough to stir empathy in Anne-Marie, and for a brief second, he thought he had broken through her wall. Then a familiar, uninvited voice blew all that to smithereens. Boy, that was touching. Joey's head darted around in search of the infamous intruder. To his surprise, Scally was sitting right next to him. He quickly turned back to Anne-Marie. "Has he been here the whole time?" "Pretty much," she responded matter-of-factly. Steam erupted from all of Joey's orifices. "Scally, you idiot!" he shouted before shoving the diminutive spy to the other end of the pew. Chapter 4. Emilio Estevez, Tina Yothers, and Apollo Creed. In the ring of pro wrestling's main practice gym, Jericho tangled with a sparring partner, while Stephen Brown watched with managerial interest from the sidelines. Of course, this was beneath the champ. He could have been spending the time brushing up on his old English, or diving into the recipe on Vietnamese caramelized shrimp that Tina Yothers had given him. Tina had been cooking up a storm ever since the famed sitcom Family Ties went off the air, and he was dying to share her latest creation with his lovely wife Jessica. The mere thought of the exotic aromas that would soon float through their kitchen was enough to make his mouth water. But now he had this peasant in the ring to deal with, and he was growing more and more frustrated by the Nat's overenthusiastic spunk. The rambunctious upstart even gained the upper hand when the gym's entrance door opened, and the clicking of Erica Martin's approaching heels distracted Jericho. The champ stepped back.
"Whoa, whoa,"
he shouted, immediately halting the proceedings. The sparring partner stood down, but Jericho reprimanded him just the same.
"Take it easy, darling. The way it works is I dictate what happens in this ring. If you're ever wearing the belt, when cows are able to moonwalk, perhaps it's the other way around."
The lesser wrestler dropped his head submissively. "Sorry, Chris."
"It's Christoph,"
the aristocratic champ reminded him. The sparring partner kicked himself over the mistake. "I mean," he stammered.
"Or champ. God. Master of the universe. Anything of reverence like that."
Jericho relished the teaching moment until his manager cleared his throat in an obvious attempt to gain his attention.
"Excuse me,"
the champ added, dismissing his opponent. He then strolled over to the corner of the ring closest to Erica and Brown. The manager was quick to apologize. "Sorry, champ, but Erica may have something for us." The executive jumped right in. "Yes, I just finished with the writers and—"
"Do you know what was on Turner Classic Movies last night?"
Erica looked to Brown over this new, bizarre interjection. The champ ignored the executive's quizzical outreach.
"The most spiritually uplifting movie of all time."
"Schindler's List?" Brown offered. "Gandhi?" Erica guessed. Jericho sighed at their quick-triggered responses. They both witnessed athletic glory of the highest order on the sidelines of many packed arenas, so the answer should have been an obvious one.
"Come now, my lovelies. This was about a tremendous human being. His story is like a flower floating through the air searching for its pedestal."
Not a clue on where his client was going with this, Brown pulled the only film Stephen King ever directed out of his managerial hat. Maximum Overdrive? Erica tried to be more consistent with the champ's clue while staying on Brown's train of thought. The Mighty Ducks? Well, both films did star Martin Sheen's oldest son. Jericho was so frustrated with them, he momentarily lost his British accent.
"How does anything I just said ring the bell of an Emilio Estevez double feature? Rocky!"
For some reason, his manager wanted immediate clarification. Which one? But Jericho suddenly segued again, as his accent returned.
"Although I did have brunch with Emilio on a yacht in Madrid back in '06. Such a lovely, lovely man."
Brown reeled his eccentric wrestler back to the Philadelphia headquarters. "Champ, which Rocky did you see?" Jericho reemerged.
"The one with Apollo Creed."
His manager pursed his lips. He was in 4 of them.
"When they fought."
"They fought twice." 3 times, Erica cut in, correcting the misinformed manager. "Apollo was Rocky's manager in part 3, Brown quickly pointed out, but they fought at the end." Brown waved away her explanation. "As a favor to Apollo, that was nothing." The executive rubbed her chin. "Didn't Apollo also fight in 4? "Not against Rocky. That was the Russian." Brown really knew his Carl Weathers. It finally sunk in with Erica. "Right, when he got killed." Jericho had enough of their unfocused exchange.
"Ladies and gentlemen, please."
They quit their banter. Then Jericho finally put the matter to bed.
It was the first one. "When Apollo gave an unknown a shot at the title."
Erica and Brown took a moment to absorb that. The champ, just wittingly or unwittingly, solved their problem. Erica tapped her mouth and smiled. I love it. Love what? Brown responded slower on the take. He nailed it. The executive's enthusiasm was lost on Jericho as well.
Nailed what? I was just going to say what a pleasure it was seeing the film again. I'd just returned from the ballet with my lovely wife Jessica, along with Ron Keel and his significant other. Suddenly we were all deep in meditation with the telly on, and there it was.
Be that as it may, but what if you gave an unknown a shot at the title? Finally, Erica spelled it out. At our biggest event of the year? Brown answered for his client incredulously. Why the hell not? Not nearly satisfied, the manager felt the need to point out the usual procedure. What about what the writers just came up with? Erica waved his query away. Forget that! Jericho, warming up to what he felt was his own idea after all, still had a sliver of skepticism flowing through his veins.
Darling, is what you're suggesting even ethical? It's the Rocky storyline. Best Picture 1976. It's not like we'd be able to sneak that past my adoring servants.
Who said anything about being sneaky? Erica clarified. It's a built-in marketing strategy, tried and true. Brown continued to poke holes in her case. Yeah, but what are the legal ramifications? There are copyright laws. The executive quickly dismissed this latest objection. It's taken care of. Haven't either of you ever seen Family Guy? How many parodies of Star Wars did they get away with? This did not sit well with the champ.
So what? I'm a parody now? I'd like you to know that I take this title defense very seriously.
Erica gave him a bemused look. Chris, no one is saying you don't... Christoph, Brown reminded her, again. For once, she ignored the pesky correction and kept her focus on the champ. But this is professional wrestling. Anything goes.
As long as I made myself clear.
Christoph's ego was sated. As a bell, Erica smiled in agreement.
Okay. You're the brains, Lady E. Do your bidding.
And at that, the champ signed off on his next storyline. With a buy-in from her famed wrestler, the executive turned to his manager for confirmation. Like Pontius Pilate, Brown washed his hands of the matter. You heard the man. As Joey and Scally stood just outside the rectory of St. Thomas Aquinas peering up at Father Randazzo's second-story window, it was obvious that the two not-so-holy handfuls needed help from the overtaxed priest. Again. Never caring much for doorbells, they went straight to their usual method of announcing their arrival by picking up a rock and tossing it. Unfortunately, it was Scally who found the first stone, so of course he fired it right through the window, shattering the glass into 1,000 pieces. Joey was at a loss. He could have critiqued his little friend's heavy hand, but what was the point? The true critic emerged through the frame of the former window in the form of Father Randazzo's head. Robert Scally, you idiot! The blonde menace took immediate offense. How'd you know it was me? He bemoaned. The priest may not have been an oracle, but he didn't need a crystal ball to predict how this court case would play out. Who else could it be? You're standing down there, aren't you? Scally pointed at the guilty by association bystander. So is Joey. Well, one of you or both of you is paying for this window. Now what do you want from my life? Aren't you coming to Joey's match? The imp asked, as if the broken window was already a distant memory. But even in the darkness of the evening, the continuous scowl of Father Randazzo was quite visible. No, Joey was hurt. Why not? It's my farewell performance. Farewell, the clever priest retorted before angrily disappearing back inside the rectory. The wounded wrestler wasn't ready to throw in the towel. Can I at least get a blessing? He called out. After a beat, Father Randazzo briefly reappeared. Fine, I'll be there, but no blessing. He didn't stick around for a further discussion. Joey stood dumbfounded for a moment. What good is that? He finally hollered. The Italian Dream would have to conquer Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league without divine intervention. Chapter 5. Going Out on Top. Joey, in his pre-fight attire, stopped to take a breath. He was standing in the middle of the last grammar school locker room he would ever step foot in just before his last Saturday night match he would ever fight in. And he was surrounded by the men he bled and sweat with, his friends, his fellow wrestlers. There was Una Grenada, who was a member of Brawl even before Joey was. They must have fought each other over 100 times over the years, trading victories and defeats to best serve their storylines. From this night on, the honorable Puerto Rican, who was mostly confused for a Mexican, would have to shoulder the historical insignificance of the Underground Wrestling League without him. Next to him was Milkshake. Athletic enough, but a bit too gangly for a wrestler, he always brought his A game to the ring, even if his A game was more like a B-. Who could forget their most recent match that garnered so much shady press, bringing racial issues to the forefront, not to mention a new alter ego for Joeylicious and a broken helmet? And who could forget Tiny? He took up a third of the locker room all by himself. Joey would miss his memorable battles with the Gentle Giant, and more importantly, he would miss their late night, heart-to-heart discussions over cheeseburger deluxes in seedy diners. Even Shamrock was floating around somewhere. Joey couldn't see the Irish rival he was about to do battle with, of course, but he was sure he was there, wasn't he? Last and certainly least, there was Joey's third-rate manager standing proudly next to him. Scally had his ups and downs, okay, mostly downs, but he was as loyal as they came when it came to all things Joey and Joeylicious. He might not take a bullet for the Italian dream, but he would take a healthy shove. But why go on and on about the scrawny blonde? He wasn't going anywhere. All those memories of shared pain and glory with his wrestling companions could have brought a tear to Joey's eye. They didn't, but they could have. "It's been an honor to serve with you, gentlemen," he said, continuing his farewell speech. "To fight with you, to fight against you. I couldn't think of a better place to hang up my boas than at St. Rita's Elementary. In conclusion, I'd just like to add," Una Granada groaned in pent-up agony. "Again? You've had like 4 in conclusions already." "Yeah, Lish," Milkshake concurred. "Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was shorter than this." "I kinda like it," Tiny countered in defense of Joey. The retiring Italian nodded with satisfaction toward his patient supporter. "There you go." But before Joey could get into his final conclusion, God willing, Lou stormed in to break up the party. "Would you guys get it in gear already? It's a full house out there." Shamrock finally made his presence known with a smug look on his face. Joey was pleasantly surprised, not by Shamrock's sudden appearance, of course, but by the shocking words of the sleazy day-to-day operator of Brawl. "We sold out? You told everyone it was my last match?" Lou scoffed at the ridiculous assumption. "No, I told everyone it was Shamrock's last match." Shamrock, clearly enjoying that, turned and cackled as he headed toward the bathroom. Lou barely acknowledged his star's departure. It was the other idiots who needed a motivational kick in the pants. "Milkshake and Tiny are up in 5 minutes. Let's go." With that, he left just as quickly as he came in. The men went about their preparatory business as if Joey's grand oration before Lou's interruption never even took place. The wrestler who was about to hang up his boas was crushed. Scally patted Joey on the back. "Don't worry, Lish. We'll make them remember you." Thinking that was more than enough support, the suspect manager moved on to other matters. His own. "By the way, I was thinking of taking on Milkshake as a client after tonight." That was the last thing Joey wanted to hear. Even his best friend was abandoning him. "You guys hate each other," Scally countered with a shrug. "It's a symbiotic relationship." "You don't even know what that word means." "Neither do you," the blonde dictionary shot back. Salvatore Morelli strolled in before their pointless argument on proper word usage truly took flight. Looking around for Shamrock's whereabouts, the sharp-dressed president of Brawl stopped at Tiny's locker for guidance. He was immediately directed toward the bathroom, but Morelli sent the human butterball in to retrieve his star instead. Seeing the man in the suit, Scally knew it was time to skedaddle. "Gimme your beer tickets. I'm making a run." Joey, never taking his eyes off Morelli, handed over his tickets without a fight. Scally passed the president on his way out, and Morelli instantly recognized him. He pointed a confused finger at the menace who previously spilled a beer on his 8-year-old. "I thought we banished you," he stammered. Scally stood firm. "I was reinstated for Joey's last match. Say hi to the kid for me," he added, throwing salt on the wound. Morelli took a threatening step forward. "Don't even think about sitting near us." Knowing better than to push things any further, Scally cackled as he triumphantly sashayed out the door. Normally, his manager's unprofessional display would have irked Joey to no end. But on this night, his last, he also had a thing or two to get off his chest. As expected, Morelli turned to him next. "Joey, Mr. President." The Italian Dream's greeting was far icier. Sensing his retiring wrestler's coldness, he decided to keep things cordial. "How does it feel to finally be leaving us?" "How do you think it feels? Moderately decent?" Morelli guessed hopefully but awkwardly. Joey went right for the knees. "Thanks for the big marketing push, by the way," he said, dripping with sarcasm. That put the president on his defensive heels. If we announced that more than one wrestler was leaving tonight, the fans would get the wrong idea. We wouldn't want them thinking something was wrong with the league, would we? Oh no, God forbid. Isn't there something wrong with the league? Joey retorted. He was enjoying this mano a mano with the man who once held his struggling career in the palm of his hand. The high school venues are where the real money is for us, Morelli futilely explained further. And we all have big plans for Shamrock. As if the mere mention of his name summoned him, Shamrock returned from the bathroom. He took a much more respectful approach with his boss. You wanted to see me, Mr. Morelli? The president sighed with relief before smiling at his star. I did. That new finishing move I saw you try and practice this week, I want you to do it on Joeylicious tonight. I'd love to, beamed the Irish Adonis. Of course, this was far less welcome news to Joey. Hey, we didn't rehearse that. So rehearse it now, Morelli shrugged. Holding up his hands, Joey tried to retreat. Wait, but Shamrock had all the approval he needed. Without another word, he quickly wrapped up the wrestling has-been and brutally performed the move on him. It was a cross between Stone Cold Stunner and Jake the Snake's DDT. In other words, pure devastation. Morelli clapped for the soon-to-be combatants as if he invented the move himself. Perfect, guys. Joe, if you could just fall exactly like that during the match. Joey groaned through his painful agony. I'm really going to miss all this. Chapter 6. The phone call from Benny Hill. At the most exclusive table in a top-shelf Thai restaurant, Jericho was dressed to the nines in a classic black tuxedo with a top hat and cane resting by his side. He wanted nothing more than to enjoy the splendors of the pompano fish on his plate, but the distraction of the casually attired Erica Martin and Stephen Brown sitting across from him with their heads buried in a book of underground wrestlers was irksome. It mattered little to the champ who they picked for him to fight. He would make quick work of the slob regardless. But the trivial exercise was once again cutting into his me time, or at least me and Jessica time. He had teased his wife about Tina Yother's delightful new recipe that he promised to prepare. But here he was stuck with these two instead, and they weren't even eating.
Must you do that at the table?
He griped.
It took me 2 phone calls to get a reservation here, and I'm an A-list celebrity.
Sorry, champ, Brown apologized without looking up. But we need to find someone for you as soon as possible. Erica didn't even acknowledge Jericho's annoyance. How about this guy? She pointed out a tough-looking masked wrestler from the book. Brown leaned in for a closer look. Masked Fury? You can't see what he looks like. Yeah, but we can play with that, Erica countered. Dipping a mere toe into the business at hand, Jericho threw in his 2 cents without even peeking at the potential challenger.
I don't do masks. It's been a pet peeve of mine ever since Lemmy from Motorhead tried to reenact that gimp scene from Pulp Fiction with me.
His manager had no argument for that. He doesn't do masks. Next. Erica turned the page and Brown studied the next set of options. Here's somebody, he enthusiastically pointed out. The albino Adonis. Great name. Erica twisted her mouth in confusion. Is he pale and beautiful? I can't tell if he's either. The pictures are black and white. How can you tell if he's pale? The albino Adonis clearly needed a better marketing team in his corner. He's an albino, the executive reminded the manager.
Did you 2 lovelies even order yet?
Jericho interjected.
Allow me to take a gander at that book.
Brown held up his hand. Hold on a second, champ. The clock was ticking to find the perfect challenger for the upcoming main event, and the initial screening was a job for the business side of the table. Wow, Lou wasn't kidding about the sold-out crowd. The gym of St. Rita's Elementary School was packed to the rafters with bloodthirsty Shamrock fans fired up for their departing champion. Sure, Joeylicious had his scattered support including Scally, Father Randazzo, and Anne-Marie, but this was a road game of the highest order. The Italian Dream hadn't fought in such a hostile environment since his early days when he had actual promise. His outdoor steel cage match against Terry the Tooth in '99 was one such example. Not so much for the crowd exactly, but for the SUV that accidentally crashed into the cage itself. The cage had been set up in the middle of the street, and no one thought to lay down orange cones to ward off traffic. The Tooth was climbing to the top of the cage when the SUV came through, and fell 25 feet to the canvas upon impact. Ironically, the fall cost him the 1 tooth he had left. With the current match already at its zenith, Shamrock smirked to his peeps just before performing his devastating finishing move on his washed-up opponent. Again. But when he rolled on top of Joeylicious for the pin, the retiring challenger would have none of it. He kicked out at the count of 2 and waved a no finger, a la Hulk Hogan, to the entire gym. Post-slap, the Italian Dream may have been an enemy to the Hulkster, but he could still steal his childhood hero's ornamental flourishes when appropriate. Irony can be pretty ironic sometimes. Shamrock spat his annoyance. "What the hell, Lish? That was the finisher we just rehearsed. Who said I was finished?" Joeylicious retorted. And then he retorted further with a punch directly to the smug wrestler's grill. A real punch. Stunned by the unscripted blow, Shamrock grabbed his nose as blood quickly flowed from it. The crowd, including Scally, Morelli, Father Randazzo, and Anne-Marie, were equally stunned as they all fell silent. Something about that punch was definitely different. Even Lou, walking the floor, stopped to see what was happening. "You broke my nose," Shamrock screeched like a little bitch. With no apology offered, Joeylicious nearly decapitated his whining nemesis with a brutal clothesline that sent Shamrock sprawling to the canvas. Of course, Scally's initial surprise turned to elation. "That's it, Lish. Strap it on. Take that belt." As the Italian Dream, who was also known as the Tower of Power who was too sweet to be sour, climbed the turnbuckle, a concerned Morelli looked over to Lou and mouthed, "What is this?" Lou could only shrug. There would be no refunds handed out at St. Rita's, and that's all he was concerned about. As the executive and his manager continued to sweat over a book at the table, Jericho finally honed in on his pompano. As far as he was concerned, the only crisis fast approaching was the one in his stomach. In contrast, Erica and Brown had established a rhythm as they sifted through the underground wrestling pages at lightning speed. It was getting to the point where they weren't even taking in all the images anymore. Finally, Erica spotted a potential challenger on a page they just passed. "Wait, go back!" Brown flipped back one page and pointed. "Him?" Erica flipped back another and slammed her finger on a very familiar photo. "Him. Well, very familiar to us anyway." The manager pulled the book in closer and read the name under the brawl combatant's image. Joeylicious, the Italian Dream. "It's perfect," the executive beamed. "Italian Dream, Italian Stallion. He even looks like Stallone." Brown wasn't so sure. "Does he?" "Well, with long hair," Erica clarified. "What's that movie when Stallone played the cop?" "Nighthawks. But he had a beard in that. Great film." And Brown really knew his late 70s pop culture. Jericho didn't even need to see what they were seeing before chiming in.
Rambo.
His manager was too immersed to hear that. "What's that, champ?" The wrestling aristocrat looked up from his half-eaten pricey fish.
In the Rambo films, Stallone had long hair without the beard.
Brown snapped his fingers and looked to Erica. "Quick, your phone. Google some Rambo images." They were finally nearing pay dirt, and the anxious manager could feel it. If the tablemates only knew who their potential Brooklyn savior actually was. Although Joeylicious currently looked the part as he stood on the top rope of the ring with his arms extended, he leapt and landed a bone-crushing elbow on Shamrock's chest. A bonkers scally was heard over the entire sold-out crowd. "Finish him, finish him." But instead of listening to the first piece of sound managerial advice he ever got or would get, Joeylicious made the same mistake nearly every other wrestler made just before they lost. He strutted around the ring and played the crowd. "You all thought you were here tonight to witness the triumph of a departing champion." Morelli was completely flabbergasted. He had no recourse to stop the brawl disaster that was apparently unfolding. "Well, you were right," the retiring challenger continued. "Just not the kind of right you thought you'd be." Naturally, the Italian Dream's lack of focus on his opponent gave Shamrock just enough time to recover and struggle to his feet. Unaware of what was happening behind him, Joeylicious pointed to his girl, or so he thought. "Anne-Marie, this is for you." Sensing her ex-fling's demise, Anne-Marie really wished it wasn't. "Lish, turn around," Scally cried out desperately. A second piece of managerial advice, all in the same night. Unprecedented. Confused by his loyal manager's sudden concern, Joeylicious turned back to the brawl champion without a clue, until Shamrock wrapped him up and again performed his painful finisher on him. For real this time. The Italian Dream slept right through the ref's 3 count, and Shamrock officially graduated to high school venues with his belt intact. Scally was outraged by the turn of events. Foul, disqualification. Naturally, no one listened or cared to his objections. Erica frantically rummaged through Sylvester Stallone images on her iPhone until she found the one she was looking for. Holding up the star's Rambo pic next to Joey's Joeylicious photo, she enabled the table to best consider the similarities. Brown was in awe. "Oh my God, it's him!" "I told you," the executive beamed. Finally, putting down his fork, Jericho gestured for the iPhone and the underground wrestling book so he could take a closer look for himself. Erica and Brown waited on pins and needles for the champ's response to the images. If he approved, they were in the clear. Unfortunately, the fish connoisseur did have one minor objection.
More like Frank Stallone playing Rambo, no?
The executive agreed internally, but there was no time for perfection given the constraints. Close enough. The manager was already sold and decided to sign off for his client for him. "We better get back to the office, start making some calls," he practically shouted as he stood up. Erica snatched her phone back from the champ and was already dialing. "Way ahead of you." As she rushed away from the table with Brown in tow, Jericho looked down at what was left of his cold pompano.
Darlings, can't I even enjoy my dessert? The green tea sorbet is to die for.
His pleas were ignored as the executive and his manager were already long gone. The champ could only sigh. This would be the first and last time he rented a tux for a fish dinner. Mrs. Casada waited nervously in the living room until she heard the familiar sound of ascending footsteps. This wasn't exactly a weekly routine for her, but lately Joey's peculiarities, not to mention injuries, had worsened. If he wouldn't give up on his wrestling pipe dream, she would have to send him packing, or at least start charging him rent. On top of that, Father Randazzo's counsel had apparently run its course, and a shrink was likely in order. After all, a grown man with imaginary friends wasn't always the work of the devil. She stood up as her son limped through the door battered and beaten. Worst of all, the idiot Scally was with him. Before either of them could open their mouths, she held up an impatient hand. "I don't even want to hear it." Then she pointed directly at the blonde menace. "You, go home." "What home?" Scally bemoaned. "I'm on the streets again, Mrs. C." "Ask me if I care," Mrs. Casada responded coldly. He foolishly took that literally. "Do you care?" "No," Joey covered his ears. "Enough with the shouting. I already have a headache." At that, his mother turned her anger on him. "I told you to listen to the doctor. From this moment on, you'll wrestle no more." Joey held up his hands in surrender. "Fine, from this moment on." "I mean it," she warned. Scally felt the need to jump in. "So does he, Mrs. C. We just came from Joey's retirement match." Of course, Mrs. Casada had heard this all before, but something about the look on her son's face made her believe that they weren't kidding this time. Joey read her thoughts. Yup. The landline phone rang. Once the shock of Joey's sincere submission subsided, his mother answered it. "Hello? Hold on." She extended the cordless to her son. "It's for you." Too drained both bodily and spiritually, Joey couldn't even absorb how strange it was to receive a late-night call on their landline on a Saturday. He just limped over and took the phone. "This is Joey. Who is this?" His forehead wrinkled as he listened. "You sound like Benny Hill. Could you repeat that?" His expression barely changed as his interest in the mysterious caller intensified. He nodded once, then twice, then passed out. His deeply concerned mother rushed over. "Joey!" With Mrs. Casada preoccupied with her son, Scally picked up the phone out of curiosity. "Who is this?" His forehead wrinkled as well. "You do sound like Benny Hill. Is that little old bald guy still alive?" And now his expression barely changed. "Could you repeat that?" Seconds later, he was passed out on the floor next to his friend. Mrs. Casada looked at the comatose pair, unsure what to think. 100 miles away, on the other end of the line, a perplexed Jericho stared at his cell while Erica and Brown looked on. He leaned forward.
"Joseph? Joeylicious?"
When there wasn't an answer, he hung up and turned to the other two.
"All right. I guess we're all set then,"
he concluded quite matter-of-factly.